Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about amplitude, midline, and period, which are all parts of the graph when you graph sine, cosine, and tangent. So first we're going to start with amplitude. Amplitude is the height of a sine or cosine function. A graph in the form of y equals sine a of x or y equals a sine of cosine x has the amplitude of the absolute value of a. In other words, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. The amplitude of a standard sine or cosine graph is 1. In other words, it's written as y equals 1 sine of x. But as we all know, a 1 is implied, so it would just be written y equals the sine of x. The formula for amplitude is actually the max minus the min divided by 2. So if you don't just read it off of there, you can always look at where the top of the graph is and the bottom of the graph is and divide it by 2. So let's look at some examples. So in this graph, the amplitude would be 6, because the 6 is in the A position, so the amplitude is going to equal 6. In this graph, this is in the A spot, so the amplitude is just going to be 4, because remember the amplitude is the absolute value of A. And in this graph, the amplitude is going to be 1/3. If you look at this graph, hopefully you can see it goes from all the way up to 2 down to 4. So we can just take it and use our formula. 2 minus negative 4, which gives us absolute value of 6 over 2, which is going to give you an amplitude of 3, which you also could have actually counted and gone down 1, 1, 2, 3, and come up 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to slide this border because I need it again. Okay, so let's talk about what midline means. Midline is the horizontal line that cuts the line in half. The midline is halfway between the max and min. In a standard sine or cosine graph, it's going to be the x-axis. But in one that translates, it goes up and down. The formula for midline is the max minus min divided by 2, just like with amplitude. However, this time we don't take the absolute value. And as I just said, when there's no vertical translation, your midline is at y equals 0. I think I just said x-axis. I meant to say the y. So if we looked here, it kind of helps you know where our midline is. So on this, our midline would be 0. Because there's no vertical translation. Here, there's also no vertical translation, so our midline is at y equals 0. But look, here, we have that plus 5, and just like in every other type of graph, a plus 5 means that we have a vertical translation, so our midline is at y equals 5. If we look here, your midline is actually down here where this red line is. And again, we can find it by doing the max minus min divided by 2. So if we did 2 minus negative 4, wait a minute, what is it, max plus min? Max plus min, excuse me, max plus min divided by 2. So we would get negative 2 over 2 and learn that our midline is at negative 1, which is where it is. Okay, so that's midline. Notice there is a little bit of a difference in the formula. Alright, so what about period? We talked about it briefly before. The period is how long it takes to complete one cycle, or how many degrees there are to a cycle. So the period of a regular old sine graph is 360. The period of a cosine graph is also 360, and the period of a tangent graph is 180. So what happens when we start getting a number here? Well, the period of sine of 2x is 180. Period of a sine of 3x is 120. Consequently, the period of sine of y equals of 4x is 90. Here's why. Your period formula is period equals 360 over b, where b is the coefficient of x. So here, all of these x's have a coefficient of 2, 3, and 4. And because there's a coefficient, our period becomes shorter. So in that case, when we drew our sine graph, 90, 180, it's still going to start at 0, but it's got to tap out and end up at 180 and be done. So it's going to shorten the length of your graph. For tangent, remember our regular tangent, the period is only 180, so the period formula is 180 over b, still where b is the coefficient of x. And that is how you graph a sine, cosine, and tangent graph, and what the meanings of period, midline, and amplitude are.